Itaú Bank. Could this be the best bank to invest in Brazil? I'll eventually make an X-ray on Brazilian stocks featuring Itaú, where I'll dive deeper into the bank's operations and structure. For now, let's start with some context and key facts about the company. Itaú has 100 years of history, and it's the largest bank in Latin America when measured by total assets. The bank holds 3.2 trillion Brazilian reais in total assets, has a market capitalization of roughly $100 billion, and a loan portfolio approaching 1.5 trillion Brazilian reais. It's a number rivaling Bank of Brazil's portfolio, which is, well, the Bank of Brazil. One spectacular fact is its high return on equity, nearly 25% ROE. What's even more impressive is that this isn't a one-time event. Historically, Itaú has consistently delivered ROEs above 20%. And finally, notice that 95% of profits come from Brazil, while the remaining 5% come from operations outside the country. Here we have this beautiful chart showing Itaú's profit growth from 2013 through 2025. Notice that throughout this period, with the exception of the pandemic, the bank consistently delivered ROEs above 20%, which is an outstanding level of profitability for the Brazilian bank sector. Now, in the first quarter of 2026, ROE increased to its highest level since 2013. In fact, today, Itaú Bank represents the best performing stock on the Brazilian stock market since the Plano Real. Plano Real was an economic stabilization program launched in 1994 to combat the hyperinflation that plagued Brazil. It was also the program that introduced Brazil's current currency, the real. Now, let's look at some highlights from the quarter. Itaú earned 10% more profit than in the first quarter of the last year. ROE reached 24.8%, an all-time high. If you isolate only the Brazilian operations, ROE reached 26.4%. That's well above Bradesco Bank and Santander Bank, which currently generate ROEs in the 15 to 70% range. 17. Bank of Brazil is expected to deliver something closer to 10 to 13% this year. So when it comes to Brazilian banks, Itaú is the clear standout. The 1.5 trillion loan portfolio also showed strong growth, increasing 9% year over year. Another impressive fact is that despite the challenging environment for banks, with delinquency rates rising and approaching their highest levels in the past decade, Itaú's non-performing loan ratio remained stable at just 1.9%, one of the lowest figures in Brazil's financial system. In other words, Itaú has been exceptionally effective at lending money to high-quality borrowers. By the way, Itaú has meaningful exposure to retail banking. About 38% of its Brazilian loan portfolio consists of loans to individuals. This includes credit cards, personal loans, payroll-deducted loans, vehicle financing, and mortgages. Notice that even with significant exposure to consumers, the bank continues to maintain excellent credit quality. Now, let's talk about net interest income. We can think of this as revenue generated by the bank's interest-related activities. Most of this revenue comes from lending operations, and basically net interest income remains both strong and stable. As for credit quality, delinquency remains well controlled at 1.9% for the period. This is the lowest level among Brazil's major banks and demonstrates the high quality of the bank's customer base. This is reflected in the cost of credit. Here we have loan loss provisions in Brazilian reais, 10 billion reserved for future potential defaults. The amount increased slightly, but relative to the size of the loan portfolio, it represents only 2.7%. For comparison, at Bradesco and Bank of Brazil, credit costs have represented approximately 4 to 5% of the loan portfolios. When it comes to dividends, Itaú pays shareholders every month, which is an excellent payment frequency. With the exception of the pandemic period, Itaú typically distributes around 65% of its earnings as dividends. Since the share price has appreciated significantly, the dividend yield naturally declines. However, if earnings continue growing at the pace currently projected by analysts, investors should continue to see growing dividends in the years ahead. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Brazilian investor, literally from Brazil. Muito obrigado Um forte abraço e até a próxima.